no matter how many other people love this successful image of us, we never feel that love because it doesn't get through. It goes to the image. And so this is where you've probably heard the term imposter syndrome or feeling like a fraud. Very successful people end up feeling like this way. Not the only reason, but one reason is because of this, is because they've built up an image. The image is wonderful. Everybody loves it, but it doesn't feel like them. It's not their true self. There's distance between it.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Andrew Daniel, who chats about awakening ourselves. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote comes from Darren Hardy. Everything you need to be great is already inside of you. Stop waiting for someone or something to light your fire. You have the match. I keep saying, the biggest obstacle is the mirror. It's not anything else that happens to you in life. You just got to figure out how to light your match and go do what you love. When you find that place, it is truly fun, enjoyable, and life is really cool. One of the ways to find that, one of the ways to relax and think is with water. Have you ever noticed how relaxing being in water is? It could be the shower. It could be a hot tub. It could be the beach. The sounds and feelings tend to bring a calmness, and they also bring fun. You ever watch a bunch of kids running around in a sprinkler or a water fight? It's kind of funny. We're like fish out of the water these days. 71% of the earth is covered by water. Up to 60% of our body is water. Can't live without it. So let's have more fun. I encourage you to find more time to be at peace with what's natural and abundant in the world. And that's one of our topics today as we chat about how to get our body in alignment with what we want in life and how to kind of do that awakening, light that match. Our guest is Andrew Daniel. He is an award-winning and international best-selling author. He's director of the Center for Cinesomatic Development, and he does workshops all over the world for that. He helps professionals see elusive patterns that hold them back. He looks at movement and diagnostics and advanced intuition, and he's got integrating approaches that use different therapies across a broad spectrum to essentially bring us together. His book is Awaken to Your True Self. and he has a very successful past, and he's also advisor to the Alan Watts organization. Let's meet Andrew and learn from him. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Andrew Daniel. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks for having me, Rocky.
I'm excited to learn from you today. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, what was it like growing up? It's a big story. I'll keep it brief and relevant. Growing up, we were lower middle class, and I was born in California. And then when I was 5, 6 years old, we moved to a small town in upstate New York. And when I started school, I had warts on my fingers. And so going into first grade, not knowing anybody, not having any friends already from being a part of the community, I was bullied and teased a lot. And that set the foundation for the next 20 years of my life of dealing with feeling suicidal, depressed, not having friends, being rejected, poor social life, kind of being in this victim mentality for a few decades. And that stress and drama and pain and suffering was mostly around my social life at school. And I was also above average in intelligence. And so having issues just in schooling and what I was learning and in that environment, there was also friction just from school. And so I, out of the gate, had a very, I don't want to say rebellious, but I had some problems with authority. Nothing legal wise, but my dad and school and teachers, there was this constant friction. And while I was growing up, it created a lot of pain. Later on in my life, it has become the biggest blessing because it's created an identity where I think for myself, where I question things. But questioning authority when you're 7 years old, 14 years old, and your dad's very traditional and do what I say because I said so, creates a lot of trouble. So beyond that environment, my parents, like I said, my dad and my mom, when they got together and they first started raising me, I was a stepfather, so about 5, 6 years old. My dad he was an English major, didn't necessarily mean he was making a lot of money. And so that he worked his ass off to provide for me and my mom and himself and my family. He got 2 jobs, very low wage jobs to start with, but he did everything that he could to provide for me and his new family. So I have great admiration. I have great respect for that sort of sacrifice, working 80 hours a week, part-time jobs, or 2 full-time jobs just to make ends meet. So I just want to start off with that gratitude and appreciation. With that said, growing up in my family and at school, most things I learned about money weren't very empowering. Is the sort of classic money doesn't grow on trees. Hard work is going to get you there. Rich people are this and this and this. My dad said, my dad never said he hated rich people. He appreciated them because they gave jobs. So there was a certain capitalistic understanding that I appreciated, but still there was this undertone that rich people were separate. I learned about savings, so I got a savings account when I was really young, and that it sort of kind of ended there. We didn't have a lot of money. We didn't go on trips like everyone else. Our house wasn't big. It was everything was provided for me. So I never went without the basic needs. And again, I'm very grateful for that. However, beyond that, I didn't learn about anything about entrepreneurship, investing, just even functional things around abundance. It was very scarcity, poverty thinking. Even to this day, my parents, I still hear conversations around scarcity. And so I grew up in an environment where they were constantly living paycheck to paycheck. Then they had 2 more children, so siblings. And so there was a lot of stress. There was a lot of fighting growing up around money. And it was just simply like, we don't have it. We can't do that. And then there was debt, credit cards, and all of this stuff. So my environment growing up at school, I think we had one class of learning how to do a checkbook. But besides that, nothing about money, nothing about taxes, nothing about business or anything. So my growing up environment, I was in a lot of scarcity mentality, and that affected me for the next 15 years of my life.
How did you overcome that?
I love these really simple questions. And then I have like an essay of answers because it's been a journey. I have overcame that, and I've had multiple levels of it. So when I was 14, one of the things that happened because I had no friends was I got into computers. And so I learned a skill set, and that skill set was technology, computers, web design. And so when my first job was making $5 an hour, within the first year of that, I started a $13 an hour job. So I doubled my income essentially from applying my web design skills. And then in that time period, I actually started a software. So I wrote a piece of software. It was a particle effects and physics engine to create special effects. I ran that for about 7 years, went on to serve Fortune 100 clients, 30,000 people. And that was years later, though. But when I started that company, that was the first thing of entrepreneurship I ever knew of. My family was blue-collar worker. Nobody around me knew any of this stuff. So I had to learn. Thankfully, this was about 2006. And so there was Google. And so I just started learning. I was self-taught the same way I started learning about healing myself, because, as I said, I was made fun of and teased. And so I literally remember being 17 years old, typing in onto Google, how to be cool, how to get girls to like you, how to make friends. And the results were pathetic, but it did show me that I could learn something to change my life. I could learn something to get a different result. And so with that experience, I applied that to my financial life, my business life, my career life, and said, okay, I don't know this. Well, I can learn it. I can do something about it. And so I started learning about business. I didn't have money, so I didn't go to college, but I read books, Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, business books, things I forget, but some of these personal development, entrepreneurial classics. And so that started my journey of financial transformation. And I created this piece of software, and I'll never forget the day. So it took me about 2 years to get this out. And I'm 18 years old. I'm 19 years old. And I don't have a real job. And so I remember living with my grandparents. I moved back to California because I didn't want to stay where I grew up because everybody there hated me. They were all the people that made fun of me. And I realized if I stayed in that place, the jobs I would have would be for and with people that didn't believe in me, that didn't like me. So I started fresh. So out of California, living with my grandparents, and they kept saying, when are you going to get a real job? I'm like, I'm building a company. Like, I'm writing software. Like, I'm trying to start a business. They had no concept. They believed in me, but they didn't believe in what I was doing because it was just out of their concept. This was almost 20 years ago. There was no how to start your online business on Amazon, drop shipping. There was none of this stuff. There was no work from your laptop in Tahiti. It was get a job. And as I said in the very beginning, my relationship with school and that authority ended up being one of the best things ever for me, because I said, fuck school. I went in to learn stuff and I knew more than the teachers already. So I knew school wasn't for me. I didn't like it. And so that was all of this stuff was perfect fire, perfect kindling for entrepreneurship. So I'm doing this and my parents are like, get a job. Oh, you could be a cashier. They're hiring down the road. I'm like, I'm writing software and you want me to go and be a cashier? What on earth? So they didn't get it, but I was still young. And so they gave me grace, and there was some belief in there. And so this comes back to me saying, I'll never forget the day. So I launched my software. I'm making money. At the time, I was making maybe like $5,000 a month in passive income as a 19-year-old in 2006. So pretty awesome for me at the time, for that being twice as much as I remember my dad making. So again, the thing I'll never forget is being on a camping trip when I was about 19 or 20 years old with my family back in New York. And I think I have my phone with me with email on it. And we're out at the lake, I don't know, fishing or camping, whatever it is, with my dad. And I get 5 sales, and my software was $100 a piece. And I show my dad, I'm like, hey, Dad, while we're here camping and hanging out, I just made $500. The look on his face, he's like, I have no idea how or what that means, but that's amazing. I don't get it, but I support you. And so that sort of proof was in the pudding, that sort of validation. And since then, so that was the start of my entrepreneurial journey. And I've had highs and lows. When the iPhone came out, that business just completely crashed. That technology market was just wiped out by the iPhone. And during that time, I was getting into personal development, transformation, healing stuff, spirituality. And I was realizing, oh, I have these subconscious beliefs around money and wealth and finance and abundance and scarcity that I didn't even know were unconscious beliefs. I just thought that's how things were. That's just the reality. And so that put me on a journey of actually diving into my subconscious and uncovering money doesn't grow on trees. Well, if rich people are evil, I don't want to be evil. Well, then why would I want to be rich? And there were all of these conflicting things. And so I set out on this journey of years of addressing these things and healing this stuff. And that led me to want to teach this. As I was learning this stuff, as I was healing from the trauma of being bullied and my thoughts of suicide and depression being young, as I was healing that stuff, I was also building these businesses and having to do all this inner work in order to have a functional business. I forget who says it, but it's a great quote that there's no business problems, there's only personal problems that affect your business. And that's what I was discovering. And so eventually that led me to being homeless twice. And that was after being published by a major publisher. It wasn't a big deal as a financial deal, but it was a big deal to me. My name was up there with all of the people I had studied. And then 3 months later, I was homeless. And it was really confusing because here I was, I had a software company that made 6 figures at 19 years old. And for most of my 20s, I was learning about abundance and wealth and finances, all of these things. And then I broke through. I had one of the biggest accomplishments of life. And then I was homeless. And then that was like for 6 months. And then it happened again a few years later where I was homeless again. And so that eventually all led me to the work that I'm doing now, which is around embodiment. And so I was finally able to break through the poverty, the scarcity, not being homeless, from the software company to helping people to writing an award-winning book, a best-selling book, charging up to $100,000 for my service. And that was finally possible once I started looking at the way I was showing up in my body, how this unconscious stuff showed up in my body. So it has been a 15-year journey of scarcity, poverty, success in business, failure, rejection, homelessness, making it, not making it. And I've, about, I would say 3 years ago, I finally broke through that and reached a point of sustained wealth and abundance and fulfillment.
Out of curiosity, where did this desire to constantly learn and then the grit to keep going come from? What powered you to just keep showing up?
I had what I call choice, no choice. So let me explain. It's kind of like the concept of Wu Wei, doing, not doing, choice, no choice. Choice in the sense of I'm not a victim. It is my choice to do this, to keep going, to keep showing up, to follow my dreams, to keep going, really. But the no choice part is I don't really have a choice. There's something deeper inside of me. There's you could call it destiny, a calling, a spirit, intuition. At one point, I called it a whisper, this pilot light that when I was wanting to kill myself, there was this last little light. The whole furnace went out. There was no fire, no passion, no grit, no determination. But there was this small, tiny light that said, this isn't it. There's something else for you. Didn't know what it was, didn't know what it looked like, had no idea I was going to get there. But that feeling, that voice, has kept me going. And so every time this stuff happened, I knew there was no other choice. I tried to go to different careers. I tried different stuff. Wall, failure. Nothing happened. And so that grit and determination was, I literally have no choice. It's kind of like get rich or die trying. It wasn't necessarily that, but it kind of was. Is either I figured this out or I was going to die trying to figure it out. And I made the choice. It was certain. Either I figured this out or I'm going to die trying to figure it out. Burned my ships, right? That whole thing.
Just out of curiosity, do you know your Myers-Briggs type?
It's changed, actually, over the years. Right now, I think it's more of a IN something. Feeling, intuitive, introvert, and I forget the rest.
Okay.
But it was once, thinking. I switched from thinking to feeling, from like rational to intuitive over the years.
Interesting. More anecdotal than anything.
Okay.
That's all. I haven't spent enough time. And just the way you were talking, I'm like, oh, this sounds like X. And I just was wondering, that's all.
No.
Nothing.
Did I get it right?
Well, we don't know the exact.
Okay.
I've been told you don't change. However, you can grow. Underlying, I don't know that you change, but you may present differently.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know how much that's true. I'm not an expert in this space.
Yeah.
I just know when you start to look at people and you start to use these different types of systems, you start to see patterns in the way people show up, in the way they behave, in the way that they experience life. And it's not to say each one of them of this type is exactly the same. They're not, but they do have certain kind of rhymes to it. So let's chat about what you learned along the way. And before we get to that, I'm assuming it comes and is talked about a lot in the book. So what inspired you to write the book, Awaken to Your True Self?
I'll just bring it up here so we can see it. Well, the tagline is Why You're Still Stuck and How to Break Through. And so what inspired me to write this book was after that whole journey that I laid out for you, that you were very gracious enough to let me speak all of that. So thank you. Everything that happened on that journey has been a part of my life story. And at the end of that, I told you what made the difference, what actually broke me through after the 8 years of self-help, personal development, healing, spirituality, all of that stuff. I mentioned that there was something around embodiment that actually was the thing that finally broke me through when none of that else did it. A lot of that stuff helped, but none of it like permanently broke me through, helped me pierce that. And so I wrote this book because when I finally did, when I finally broke through all of those things, when I stopped suffering, when I finally had peace and abundance, I realized that there were certain specific things that did make the difference. And so I decided to write this book because I wanted to put all of those things into one place. So for people who were like myself, who had done a lot of work, who were self-aware, who were maybe entrepreneurs, artists, professionals, executives, creatives, directors, anybody that had something that they wanted to bring forth into the world and had already done all of this work and yet were still stuck, this book is for them. So I wrote that book in order to contain all of those missing pieces that I didn't find in other books out there.
What are some of those missing pieces?
It's almost the most natural question. Well, let's start with the one that I mentioned earlier, the embodiment piece. One of the biggest things that was a breakthrough for me, and this is what I was talking about, where I went from thinking to feeling in that Myers-Briggs, is that being a tech guy, literally being a programmer, that is very heady. That is very intellectual. You mostly are thinking through things rather than feeling through things. You're mostly in your head rather than in your body. The energy of an athlete is a bit different than an engineer and programmer. There's not a good or bad. However, there are strengths and weaknesses. So what I realized and discovered was that despite had already learned these things in my head, right? So I read the books, I took the courses, I listened to the gurus, I did the stuff. Despite knowing that in my head, it wasn't actually in my body. It wasn't embodied. And so what I mean by this is, if in my head, I know about optimism and being happy and joyous and positivity and this stuff, but in my body, I'm shut down, I'm looking down, my neck's down, my spine's down, I can't look at anybody, I can't make eye contact, I feel lethargic. That is what's getting me the results. The way I'm showing up in my body is the actual thing that gets the results. Even if I know better in my head, or even if I'm in my head, I think I'm doing it the right way, it's what's showing up in the body that is the thing that translates to results. It's like in business. You can think you know what works, but the only thing that works is what actually works when you implement it. And it's the same with the body. And the most incredible thing with that was it was not just emotional states. You see this in body language. You see this like with Tony Robbins, this very state-based body stuff. Well, it goes beyond that. There's actually these stories, these mythologies, these archetypes of making money, of spending money, of investing money, of giving, receiving, intimacy, connection, love. All of these things have a way of representing and expressing themselves in the body. And if those are distorted, if those are dysfunctional, those are going to be the things that get you the result in your life. And they may be very different than the image you have of them in your head. So it's very cutting edge. This is literally at the leading edge of somatic psychotherapies. You're not going to see this pretty much anywhere else. And so I knew that because this was the thing that broke me through, I had to start introducing this to people. So that's one thing. Another thing is around the victim mentality. And so I mentioned earlier that in my life growing up, I was bullied and teased, and my family was this and that. So the victim mentality is very insidious. It's anytime we're pointing the finger at anybody, even ourselves, we're blaming and we're giving our power away. And when we give our power away, we can't do anything to change it. So I think one of the core fundamentals of entrepreneurship is self-empowerment. You just could not be an entrepreneur if you didn't think you had the power yourself to go and create something or to create change or to be of service. And so that victim mentality that creeps in when you start, oh, well, it's the government or the weather or the economy. Once you start pointing the finger and giving the responsibility to other people to change your life, what happens is you no longer own it, and you can only change what you own, right? If someone has a car that's sitting out, that's resting or whatever, you can't go and change their car. Like, it's theirs. They own it. They have to do it. And so when we own things, which means when we take responsibility for it, that gives us the power to change it. So that getting out of the victim mentality is another thing. And I'll finish with a third thing that we briefly talked about on our pre-call here is narcissism. And most people, when they hear about narcissism and ego, it's usually about other people, right? How you deal with narcissists in the workplace or your spouse or whoever. Well, on my journey, I realized, guess what? Who was the narcissist? I was. And it looked nothing like I thought it was, because I wasn't making kissy faces. I wasn't abusing people. I wasn't in front of the mirror and my phone 24/7. So what was this narcissism that was so different? Well, one of the biggest things is a narcissistic image. And it's this image we create of ourselves because we feel like who we really are underneath that isn't good enough. And then we project this image out into the world, just like a social media avatar, right? Your Instagram. It's a perfectly curated feed of all of the ways you want the world to perceive you. That's what our narcissistic image is. And contrary to belief, a narcissist isn't in love with himself. He's in love with that image. And his love and other people's love go into reinforcing the image. And just like in the story of Narcissus and Echo, Narcissus looked into the pond and saw his own reflection. There was nothing in that reflection. A reflection's empty. An image is empty. And so what happens is so many of us feel inadequate. We feel like we're not enough. We feel like we're unlovable. And then we create an image. We maybe buy the fancy cars, the fancy suits, the fancy watches. Now, I love all of those things. But if we buy them from a place for self-approval, self-validation, or external validation and approval to keep up an image, then we're in for it. We're in for a lot of suffering, because no matter how much you validate that image, it's never you. No matter how many other people love this successful image of us, we never feel that love because it doesn't get through. It goes to the image. And so this is where you've probably heard the term imposter syndrome or feeling like a fraud. Very successful people end up feeling like this way. Not the only reason, but one reason is because of this, is because they've built up an image. The image is wonderful. Everybody loves it, but it doesn't feel like them. It's not their true self. There's distance between it. And so realizing that narcissism had more to do with this and less to do with just being involved with yourself was a huge turning point for me, because I realized, oh my God, I'm trying to be cool. I'm trying to be an authority. I'm trying to be all of this stuff. and I'm abandoning myself. I'm betraying myself in the process. So those are 3 out of probably about a few dozen of the concepts that we address in my book.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. Stepping back to victim mentality, do you think it's growing and a bigger problem today, or has it always been like this? And maybe because of social media or the times, it heard more about?
I actually think it's more now. It certainly exists throughout history, but the big problem is that it is not only enabled, it is disseminated from the top. It is the victim mentality, the poor you, the let big brother help, the let big government come in and rescue you. That is atrocious. It is being pushed by the media. It's being pushed by advertisers, right? Oh, you're broken. There's something wrong with you. We have the solution. It's outside of yourself. The government saying, oh, don't go to work. We'll pay you more to stay home and not work. All of these incentives for people to be disempowered. Because remember, the whole thing around victim mentality is responsibility. And when you advocate responsibility, you advocate freedom. Absolute freedom, Rocky, absolute freedom requires absolute responsibility. And when you're a victim, you have very little responsibility, which means what? You have very little freedom.
Do you find most people want to shy away from taking responsibility?
Yes.
Why?
Because they're going to have to face themselves.
The mirror.
Yeah.
That thing.
Yep. They're going to have to take inventory of everything they've done in their life and how they see the world. And it's going to require them to face that and change it. And when you go from pointing the finger at everybody else, and then you have to look at yourself and say, oh, I caused that. I didn't necessarily cause that, but I reacted to it in a self-destructive way. People don't want to feel it. And in order to face these things, you have to feel them. And most people want to be comfortable. And as soon as you start having to look at all of the ways you've abandoned yourself, betrayed yourself, lied to yourself, manipulated others to do it for you, it's not fun.
You mean I'm not a victim? You mean I created my own victimhood? Is that what you're saying? Oh, my.
Actually, no, it was actually the government did it, and the weather, and the economy. Yeah.
You kind of talked a little bit about this, but it wasn't clear. I find most people, they focus on tactics, they focus on prescriptions, they focus on easy self-help books, but it sounded like even with you, none of that worked. Is that the case?
So what I found is that those things are helpful. Well, some of them, some of them are not. There's a lot of them that are crap. It's the truth. There's a lot of crap out there where you have one idea that could have been in a blog post, and just because they're famous, have a big audience, they get a publishing deal and they turn it into a 200-page book. And it's not even an original idea. So that was one of the reasons that I wanted to write this, is because when you read it, I wrote it myself. It's not ghost written. I didn't steal ideas from all these other books and just bring it all together. These are my words. They come from my soul. They come from my direct experience. And it's presented in a way that you're not going to see elsewhere. It's not fluff. And so yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there that is very superficial. It's very fluffy. And there's a handful of things out there that are perennial. They're classics. They're timeless. They have truth. They have a lot of help. Now, the problem with just reading and learning and taking the courses is that it's generally only affecting things at the behavioral or attitude level. It doesn't really go into changing feeling, belief, or identity, or even spiritually moving beyond identity altogether and, moving past the ego. So it's because most of the stuff is based in ego. It is based in tactics and strategies and techniques that aren't our own, which is based in just changing a behavior. It has limited effect. And so you'll get motivated and you'll have a few weeks and you'll go, yes, queen, or you'll go, let's go, or you're going to say, yes, let's crush it. But you're moving on fumes. You're moving on this motivation. There's not a real identity shift. There's not a real healing. There's not a transformation that's occurred. And so to have these transformations, you have to go to these deeper levels. You have to go into the feeling. You actually have to face these demons. And you have to move past the persona. That's that narcissistic image. And so I call a lot of it not personal development, but persona development. And that persona development is that narcissistic image. It's like we're building these strategies, these tactics, these techniques to make ourselves better. But in the process, we lose access to who we really are. There's less intimacy. There's less beauty. There's less divinity. There's less realness and love and accessibility. It becomes a bigger and bigger fortress or a bigger and bigger hammer.
Interesting. So let's kind of take a step back, because you talk about being in your body. And I think one of the things that you talk about in your book and in that your programs is around cinesomatics. Can you explain what that is and how it pertains to all of this?
Yes. So let's just start with the word cinesomatics. 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 Cine coming from cinema, video, and somatics pertaining to the body. So basically in cinesomatics, what we do is rather than talk about it like coaching or traditional talk therapy or giving you drugs or whatever, what instead we do is we have you move. We have you move in your body, and then using cinema equipment that you'd find in Hollywood, we film this movement. And so we film you moving in your body, and that's related to certain things, right? Maybe it's around money, maybe it's around relationships, fulfillment, philanthropy, whatever it is. Then we sit down and then we play that video back. And what I do is, rather than having a checklist of body language or an analysis of things that I'm looking for, what I do is I get out of my head and I go into a more feeling-based place. So rather than thinking about what you're doing, I'm feeling into what you're doing. I'm intuiting into what you're doing. I'm having a gut vibe of what's happening. I call it a symbolic-based awareness. And then I give you feedback. And so we have the participant move in their body, we film it, and then I give feedback about what's happening. So I can see if they're self-sabotaging themselves, they're martyring themselves, they're playing small, they're caught in a box, how much money they're making, how they're able to give, to receive. Are they closed off from intimacy? Are they shut down and depressed? Are they lying to themselves? Are they conning people? Do they have a mask on? Are they faking it? All of this stuff. And so we get a reflection back of how someone's showing up in the world by how they're showing up in their body. How you do one thing is how you do anything. How you do anything is how you do everything. And so the way that you move in your body reveals how you move in your business, how you move in your relationships. And so having that feedback process along with the video that provides evidence, right? So you're not just trusting me blindly. You actually get to see these things for yourself on video. There's proof. This is not woo-woo. This is not belief-based work. This is results-based. You literally get to see this stuff for yourself. You get to see, wow, yeah, I am hiding out. I am playing small. I am taking myself out. I am self-sabotaging. And I can see that on the video. When you have this sort of feedback loop and are able to get the truth about how you're actually showing up rather than a fantasy or an idea of how you are, it's a complete game changer because that truth, that feedback is going to allow you to start making real changes in your life. So how that applies to everything is this concept of getting the feedback about all of the things that we talked about in the book, being able to see these things. And rather than adding, rather than reading more books and becoming more, it's about stopping. It's subtractive. So this work is about adding more to become more. It's about subtracting all of the untrue, subtracting all of the dysfunctional, subtracting all of the unreal things that are getting in the way between who you really are and your vision.
I'm trying to think, was it the statue of David? Who did that? Where he talks about how did you create this? Yep. And it's like, it wasn't what I created, it's what I took away until David was left.
Yeah, he was in there the whole time. It was about removing everything that wasn't him. It's exactly what we're doing here. Because here's the thing, Rocky, is that let's say you have some fundamental story that you're not enough, right? You just have felt this way. And especially maybe around your father, right? I hear this a lot. And so you spend your whole childhood, your whole life trying to show your father that you're enough or whoever it is. And so guess what happens? Even when you are enough, even when you make it, he says, great job, buddy. You're enough. You're like, great. The problem is that even if you get there, it has actually validated the lie to begin with. And it's a lie, right? That you are not enough, that inherently you are not enough, that inherently there's something wrong with you. That is a lie. And so even if you get there, 30, 40 years, you finally make it, even if you get there, it still validates that lie. And that lie is what creates suffering. And so by subtraction, by stopping, we penetrate that lie until you get to the place of peace where you realize, oh my gosh, I've abandoned myself for approval, for validation, for love and acceptance. And I was fine the entire time. But sometimes it takes an entire hero's journey to figure that out.
So just so we have this clearly, do we need to work to find our true self?
Well, do we need to work? That's an interesting thing. What I've found out is that it's probably not going to land in your lap. If you've put in decades of distortions, if you've had trauma, if you've abandoned yourself, if you've conned yourself, if you try to fix yourself, if you have addictions, if you've been avoiding life, if you've been narcissistic, if you've been a victim, if you've been doing all of this stuff your whole life, yes, it's going to take effort to stop doing it. But the important thing is that it's not an effort of the stopping, it's the journey to get to the stopping. It's like you have to be aware. There is work you have to put in to realize this stuff. You're not just going to sit here and all of a sudden all of that stuff is gone. So yeah, it does take work to get there. But once you're there, you don't need to do stuff to sustain it because unlike motivation and trying to always be happy, you're at peace. And so there is no continual energy required once you get there. But in order to get to that peace, after decades of not being there, yeah, it's going to take some work.
Do you find people create a lot of drama for their own life? And even that most of it isn't even true, but mostly made up?
Drama?
Their own drama.
Oh, yeah. Most people are addicted to drama. That's these stories. That's a lot of the suffering. So it's the difference between reporting the details and the whole narrative around it. right? It's like, I could say, I was bullied as a kid. Okay, that's the fact. Or I could say, yeah, I was bullied and people are so mean and there's nothing I could do. And blah, right? That's all the drama. That's all this whining, all this noise. And it's not real. It's actually a way to not have to feel the truth.
You've touched on spirituality. How does spirituality fit into all of this?
Well, I wouldn't say that it fits into it. I would say that all of that comes out of it. So I wouldn't try to fit spiritually into it. I would say that everything comes out of the spirit. So, yeah, I mean, that's a huge question.
Can you give us a small answer?
Yeah, small answer. Well, I gave you the micro answer. I gave you a little bigger one. How does spirituality fit into it? I think in a few ways. When I talk about intuition, when I talk about being fulfilled, being at peace, being out of suffering, having fulfillment in your vision, these are all spiritual principles, right? The Buddha, the whole premise of Buddhism is based on how to not suffer. It's like all life is suffering. That's the loose translation. And so this work is really about getting people to peace. Really, at the bottom of all of this is what I would consider a spiritual awakening. And it's not as woo-woo as it sounds. It's literally just waking up out of all of your illusions, right? These lies, these self-deceptions. And so the cinesomatic work, the book, taking responsibility for yourself, dropping the narcissistic image, all of these things lead you on a path of waking up from all of this suffering.
Interesting. Is there anything that we should have talked about but didn't get a chance to? I'm sure there's a million of them, but relevant to our conversation.
I think that was a lot, unless you have any questions about what I've said, because I know I said a lot.
No, you said a lot. And sometimes there's that one underlying thing. It's like, well, we really should talk about this. And if they had known this key, it would have all fit together, but we didn't get to it. Yeah.
There's not just one. There's lots of stuff, but I certainly think there's a lot in there. That there's a lot of stuff that we talked about that I think people listening can chew on, can start taking a look at in their own lives. Everything I'm saying, we all face these in our own ways. It's a universal journey.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't know because nobody talks about it. First of all, nobody's thinking about you. They're all thinking about themselves and they all have these same thoughts, right? That's where their cinema is running in their mind of themselves. And that's just the reality of it.
Yeah. And so what we want to do is to get out of that. And once you can break out of that cinema, you can start showing up in the real world. You have access to all of these resources, spiritual and material, in order to help you fulfill your vision, to be of great we to the world. But because we're not talking about it, because everybody's so caught up in their own drama, we don't have too many reference points or what was once called role models in our society to have vulnerability and transparency to show us what it really takes, what's really happening, and what's possible for us.
It doesn't trend well on Instagram.
No.
It's life.
Well, Rocky, that's the thing with my book. It's like, it's really hard to sell stopping. I have a chapter in my book called Stop Fixing, Start Living. The entire self-help industry is built on fixing. And so it's inherently not in a lot of these gurus' interest to say, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. Stop fixing. And so, when I'm marketing and I'm saying this stuff, it's not too popular. But when people actually do it, they're like, oh my God, this changes everything.
And that was when we had Anthony DeMello's foundation on. That was his book, Stop Fixing Yourself. You're not broken. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Having that feeling of abundance within myself first. And that looks like actually feeling abundant, having that in my body touched into that sort of archetype, and having my cup full first. When my cup is full, then I could be generous with others. When it's not full, that generosity isn't quite as pure.
And I think at the core of that is abundance doesn't require anything outside. It's an internal feeling, regardless of whether you're driving a Chevy or a Rolls Royce. I think we chase the wrong abundant message, so to speak. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Everything. Everything. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about that, so I won't ask you.
Yeah.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I got a lot. One, it's probably what I would give anybody is to make truth the most important thing. Align yourself to truth. It may create chaos. It may certainly not be easy, but the truth is love. And if you stand for truth, you stand for love. Again, it has to be real truth with a capital T, not some distortion. But make truth the most important thing. When you align your life to truth, you're aligning it to the will of God, to the Tao, to the laws of physics, to nature, to the whole process. And it's not necessarily an easy route, but it is the most fulfilling and successful route that you can take.
And I think we've forgotten what the truth is. And so it's really hard to get in alignment with it.
Well, we're not only forgetting about it, but we're on purposely not being told the truth and having what was once true being distorted. So yeah, that's why it's more important now than ever to find out what the truth is, because there are non-conspiracy theory, like real actual things happening where words are being redefined, where we're being blatantly lied to about things that are right in front of our eyes. We're being told not to believe our firsthand experience, and it is destructive to all of humanity and life. And so making that a priority it can contribute to saving your life.
No doubt. If people would like to learn more about you, the book, the programs you offer, what's the best way for them to do that?
AndrewDaniel.org.
And we will put that in the show notes to make it easy to find you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Rocky. And again, I want to say thank you for the space. You so graciously let me talk a lot. I hope it was valuable for you and everyone listening, my story and all of the lessons I've learned from that. So thank you again for being such a gracious host.
And thank you for sharing and being open and being honest about what you had to deal with and how to get through it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do you spend more of your time thinking or feeling? For me, I'm stuck in the thinking and problem-solving mode. I'm working on it, getting more towards the feeling side. We're going to have an episode on that coming up, and we're going to talk to someone who helped me a little bit with that. I'm learning that the body may actually send signals to the mind about how to think. For example, you can look at someone, you can see their feelings written all over their body language. Here's the question. What came first, the feeling or the body language? Because once you know that, you might be able to figure out how to play that game back and forth. Let's face it, the hardest action is to face the mirror, deal with our own BS. Everyone's got to find their own journey to the top of their mountain, not somebody else's. So pick wisely, keep checking your path, and honestly, having a Sherpa along the way to help guide you sure does help. Who do you know who might enjoy this episode? Would you do me a favor and would you share it with them or post wherever you post on social media? I would appreciate that. And thank you for doing so. Next week, we're going to talk to Steve Campbell about how to get what you want in life. Because at the end of the day, that's what's important. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.